So I haven't played UFC 5 in a while, but I did hear about the huge update that will give players 30 new fighters over the next couple of months. I know that UFC 5 has been a victim of criticism from fans ever since its launch date. Some of the more common complaints that I've heard are that there's not enough tax on stamina, which encourages players to break their opponents by throwing over 100 strikes per round without really having to worry about getting tired. Another complains that the clinch can be abused to continuously elbow your opponent to cause a doctor stoppage. And the next complaint was that the roster didn't have enough fighters to truly represent the current UFC roster, which this new update should help fix. I would say that these fighters that EA is adding should have been here from the start, and I'm sure that many people would agree with me. The biggest question that I have is, with all these new fighters being added, will any of them truly feel unique, or will it feel more like a different skin? UFC Undisputed 3 was praised for its extensive roster, as well as the plethora of animations for both striking and grappling. So for today's video, I'm going to test out if some of the recent fighters that have been added have a unique feel that separates them from the rest of the pack. The fighters I'm going to focus on will be Muhammad Mokaev, Umar Nurmagomedov, Bryce Mitchell, and Sean Brady. This video may not be as in-depth as you would like, as I'm mostly going to compare features such as the fighter's idle stance, punch speed, block, and strike animations. I will first start off by showing the fighter's stance without holding block, followed by the block animation, and then a simple jab straight combo. So some of my initial thoughts at first glance, I noticed that Muhammad Mokaev appears to be the only fighter in his idle stance to keep his hands relatively close to his face, while all the other fighters tend to keep their hands low. Another thing that I noticed is that Umar's stance, his idle stance, seems to be much wider base, more like a wrestler compared to the other fighters. Muhammad Mokaev seems to have the most narrow stance. Bryce Mitchell seems to be the one that stands the most upright. When it comes to the actual blocking animation, it appears that Bryce Mitchell, Umar Nurmagomedov, and Muhammad seem to have a very similar blocking style, whereas Sean Brady seems to have a slightly different animation. While Bryce Mitchell, Umar, and Mokaev keep both their hands pretty much essentially glued to their face, it appears that Sean's rear hand is actually closer to his chin rather than up on his forehead like the other fighters. As far as the jab straight animations, I think Umar had the more unique jab compared to all the other fighters, and I did notice that Bryce Mitchell's combination came out slower than the other fighters, as he had the lower hand speed compared to all the other ones. Now, I don't want to just look at the jab straight animations between these fighters. I did want to test out a few other things, such as, maybe like how their lead and rear leg kicks would combine, as well as a jab straight body kick combination. My initial analysis when it comes to the movement was that the lighter weight fighters such as Umar and Muhammad are actually moving much faster in their stance compared to the other fighters, which is not a huge surprise as you would expect lighter weight fighters to move faster than the heavier ones. I was surprised that while throwing I believe it was the rear body kick, Bryce Mitchell was actually the only fighter that had an animation where he would spin back to his original stance if his kick missed, while the other fighters did not. Although Muhammad Makayev would actually do something similar if he threw the lead body kick. I think you can take my analysis with a grain of salt, as I'm really just using the fighters in practice mode, and I'm sure that it might make a slight difference if I was playing against actual players or maybe even the AI, because I know certain fighters will have higher punch speed or power, which allows you to rock your opponents a little more easily. But overall, there weren't a whole lot of differences that I noticed between the fighters outside of their speed and idle stance animations. Before I make my final analysis for the video, let me start off by saying that stats such as strike speed will definitely affect how fast you can throw your combinations. Health stats will make fighters more likely to become rocked or gas out earlier than others. And on the ground, stats says submission defense will play a factor in how quickly your fighter can be submitted. And in these aspects, you can feel a difference between certain fighters. However, when it comes to using fighters that have a 4.5 star rating or higher, it's hard to tell a difference between them, as these fighters tend to be pretty well-rounded and have high stats in many areas. I think another factor that can make it feel like all fighters feel the same in UFC 5 could be the fact that many UFC 5 players have a very similar playstyle. In the sense that whether they're using a wrestler or a striker, many players just want to focus on the striking aspect of the game, rather than the grappling. And in this sense, it can make it feel like all fighters feel the same. Do I think that UFC 5 is as diverse as UFC 3? No. Not by a long shot. But it may not be as cut and paste as it's made out to be. Let me know down in the comments if you guys agree with my analysis. Give me your thoughts and opinions, and I will see y'all in the next one.